Namaskar and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Vasanthi. I'm from the Center for Media Studies and I will be moderating the webinar today. On behalf of the CMS Vatavaran team, I'd like to welcome you all to this webinar. This is a part of a Lockdown 202 special online festival that we start from today on the theme Celebrating Biodiversity. The festival starts today and will have daily programs up to June 8th. As part of this festival, you can see free award-winning films and interact with eminent filmmakers every day on Facebook and YouTube. You can go to our handles or CMS Vatavaran on Facebook and YouTube and watch these films for free. The screening schedule, of course, of both the films and the question and answer session will be available on our website, cmsvatavaran.org. We also have a very special workshop for educators and teachers and a special quiz competition for students on World Environment Day, that is June 5th. As for young filmmakers and students, there is an opportunity to interact with Oscar winner Swati Tyagarajan. So please participate, share the information in your network, and enjoy these programs, and that will also inspire you. I'd like to also take a minute to thank our partners, Lead the Green Change campaign of the European Union delegation in India and the Canadian High Commission for their support in organizing this 18-day online festival. Also, before we start this webinar, I'd like to mention and acknowledge my colleagues who put together this program working from home in this lockdown, of course. So Mr. Sabyasachi Bharti, Ms. Kavita Rakheja, Mr. Suraj Das, Mr. Rajkumar, Ms. Preeti Kashyap, and Mr. Zia, who are my colleagues at CMS Vatavaran. Thank you all for putting together this program. And here we go. So today is World Biodiversity Day. And why is this important? I mean, I'm sure many people must be wondering, why are we making so much of a fuss about this particular day? And that's exactly what we want to know a little bit from the experts present today. Amidst this ravaging COVID scenario in our country and the resultant havoc it has created among all our lives and work, we are here today to discuss how and why biodiversity is linked to the pandemic. Today, to explain more on this linkage between the pandemic and the biodiversity, we have with us three eminent environment scientists and passionate conservationists. All three of them have distinguished background and contributed to the conservation sector by their numerous projects, workshops, talks, papers, and academic publications. Let me introduce them to you. We have today Dr. Abhi Vanak, who is an animal ecologist and conservation biologist. His current work focuses on ecology and conservation. Just 1 minute, please. His current work focuses on ecology and conservation of India's semi-arid savanna grasslands and its unique set of endemic and endangered fauna. He holds a bachelor's degree in zoology from Loyola College, Chennai, a master's degree in wildlife science from Wildlife Institute of India, and a PhD in wildlife science from the University of Missouri, Columbia, and also has a postdoctoral fellow at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in Durban, South Africa. He is currently a fellow at the Center of Biodiversity and Conservation of an eminent organization, ATREE, Ashoka Trust for Research in Ecology and Environment. I'm sure most of you have heard about him and this organization. Then we have Carl Zeiss Conservation Awardee, Dr. Anish P. Andheria, who is a fellow of LEAD and president of another very important organization, the Wildlife Conservation Trust, or popularly known as WCT. He has his doctorate from the Institute of Chemical Technology and a master's degree in wildlife biology and conservation from the National Center for Biological Sciences, Bangalore. He is a large carnivore biologist with a field experience in predator-prey relationships. A wildlife photographer of repute, Anish has photographed some of the remotest wildlife reserves in India. I'm glad to share that his photography workshops at our festival are always a great hit. They are always in demand actually. And he has been on our award jury of CMS Vatavaran. Welcome again, Anish. Then we have
Pleasure.
Mr. Siddharth Edake, who has Masters of Science in Biodiversity and currently working as a fellow and area convener of the Center for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services at TERI, the Energy and Resource Institute, New Delhi. For more than a decade, he has focused on conserving forests and biodiversity across India through research and action. His passions include, of course, wildlife photography and traveling. And he's joining us from Nainital. Welcome, Siddharth. He has
Thank
been
you
working
for
on documenting as well as establishing, strengthening community conserved areas in state of Nagaland since 2015, and we'll hear more about it later in the discussion today. So let us start. Welcome all three of you. I wish there were more women conservationists also joining us today, but because of the difficulty in reaching such scientists who are mostly in the field, we've not been able to get them. I'm lucky that you three are available and are participating today. Thank you once again for taking out time. So let us start the discussion today with understanding why is biodiversity important to all of us, and why do we celebrate this day as World Biodiversity Day every year on May 22nd. I want to invite Abhi to talk a little bit more, and then I'll go over to Anish and Siddharth. Abhi, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Vasanthi. And it's great to be in this panel to talk about the importance of biodiversity on World Biodiversity Day. So what is biodiversity? In a sense, it's the diversity of life around us. It's all the species that we see or interact with every day. But biodiversity simply is not just a bean counter of the number of species out there. It's not just a checklist. It's also the interaction between these species, the kinds of habitats they occur in, and the diversity of habitats themselves, of the ecosystems that are out there. All of this more broadly constitutes the kind of environment that we're trying to conserve on a daily basis as we face one of the greatest challenges of our times. And I'm not talking about the COVID-19 pandemic, but the loss of biodiversity and the impending crises from the climate emergency that is coming, that we are seeing every day, the effects of which we are seeing every day, is what we are facing, and those are the biggest challenges we are going to see going forward. The current pandemic is a symptom, is an outcome of the type of effects we are likely to increasingly see if we don't learn to tackle these different emergencies, these different crises that have come upon us. So, I mean, when we talk about having one World Biodiversity Day, in a sense, every day is Biodiversity Day, just like every day is Earth Day, and every day is Father's Day, and every day is Mother's Day, and so on, right? We don't have a planet B.
Yes.
I wish we could, all those billionaires who want to go to Mars, I wish we could ship them to Mars and say, so long, and thanks for all the fish. But this is our planet. Mars has no chance of, or the moon for that matter, has, requires enormous efforts to support one single human. Here we are, a planet supporting a population of almost 8 billion humans, and this wonderful diversity of life that we see around us and we enjoy, and that sustains us. And that's why, to celebrate all of that, we should really recognize the importance of biodiversity around us. And as I think we'll discuss later on in the panel, we'll also talk about, I think, challenges of loss of biodiversity, the kinds of impacts that we see, and what we can do to try and help.
Yeah, thank you, Abhi. And Anish, how would you explain what is biodiversity and why is it important to have a day to celebrate it? You're muted, Anish. Anish, you're muted.
Sorry. So first, I would like to just spend a couple of minutes on what is the significance of today. So
Yeah.
basically, you have to go back in time. In 1993, the committee of the UN General Assembly decided that December 29 will be the World Biodiversity Day. But what happened was subsequently it became very difficult for countries to participate because 29 December is a busy day for all the countries because it's the end of the year. There are a lot of celebrations. So the importance of the day was not really realized. And so subsequently in, I think, 2000 is when in the assembly, it was to commemorate the text on the Convention of Biological Diversity.
CBD.
They decided that, yeah, CBD, that the day would be 22nd of May. So it started in 1993. The date changed later in 2000, and in 2000 it's just to celebrate that particular day where the text was adopted or for CBD is when this day was fixed. So that's about uh, the importance of today.
Okay.
However, like Abhi mentioned, every single day is equally important, and not only for conservationists and scientists like us, but also for every human being. And I keep repeating this, that people who are breathing oxygen, we breathe almost plus 20,000 plus times in a day. And so if every single breath of ours with COVID, you now know how important that breath is. We always took it for granted, and now we know how important the oximeter has become for us. So when you look at a human being, which is one small component of the larger biodiversity, we have really understood the significance of good quality air, good quality water, and health. Think about more than 1 million species. So this planet has about 1.3 million known species. And when I talk of species, most of us keep thinking about land, but there are many more species in the ocean than there is on land. So if you add all of those, we have probably 3 million to 9 million species. But as of now, we know about 1.3 million species.
Yes.
All of those together constitute biodiversity. And biodiversity and the oceans, biodiversity and the land and the forest are intricately woven, which means when you talk of the forest, you are actually already talking about biodiversity as part of it. If you talk of a butterfly or you talk about a tiger, you're automatically talking about its habitat. Or you talk about an octopus, you are automatically talking about the oceans. So it is a synonym, actually, if you ask me. So biodiversity, forest, biodiversity, ocean, or aquatic ecosystem, whatever you call it, for it is impossible to have diversity of species without habitat, and it is impossible to have good quality habitats without the species. So biodiversity per se is an extremely important reality. But the sad part is that the biodiversity has already dropped, and and so if you look at the number of species, the number of individuals sometimes go up, but the diversity goes down. So we have to understand that even when we talk of climate change, the climate change connection with forest degradation is very directly understood, but people have not realized that biodiversity also has a huge impact on climate change.
Yes.
And so we have to consider that just by growing forest, which means if there is a degraded land, just by growing monoculture forest, you are not going to be able to fight the battle against climate change.
Yeah.
So you have to talk about forest in conjunction with biodiversity and vice versa.
And they're interlinked, of course. Yes.
Completely.
Yeah, that's a good explanation on what biodiversity is. So, that do you want to add on what your understanding of biodiversity is and why is it important?
Thanks, Vasanthi. I think Abhi and Anish have already covered what is the importance of biodiversity, and that's a good point by Abhi, that you have to look beyond species. And Anish has also elaborated on the intricate relationships that we have. When we talk about biodiversity, then we automatically are talking about forests, then or a tiger. Then we are talking about how the tiger is related to its habitat. Then it's a very intricate relationship that exists. I think in India we are very blessed. It's one of the most mega diverse country in the world, despite being the second largest population. So we almost cover about 16% of world's population. We just have about 2% of the world's total land area. Yet India has managed to conserve and protect and harbor almost 7 to 8% of total world's biodiversity. So this, I feel, is a huge plus point that we have for our country. And as I said, close to 45,000 species of plants and over 91,000 species of animals. That's a record in itself. And even if we talk about ecosystems, we are blessed to have wetlands. We are blessed to have alpine regions where snow occurs, deserts, rainforests, which you can see in Arunachal Pradesh. So there are several ecosystems that one can witness and see within our country. So that's what I wanted to add.
So yes, thank you very much for giving us those facts and figures. Those are extremely important, and we are very fortunate in our country to have such a rich biodiverse ecosystems that are there. But obviously, as both Abhi, Anish and Siddharth have mentioned, that there is a loss, or this intricate relationship that we found of biodiversity with climate change is also there with humans, and human action has made an impact on biodiversity and also modified the wildlife population structures at an unprecedented rate. Let me give some examples. In the last 50 years, the human population has doubled, the global economy has almost quadrupled, and the global trade has increased by approximately 10 times. Today, it would take 1.6 Earths to meet the demand that humans make on nature each year. But we don't have a planet B, just like Abhi mentioned. And more species are at risk of extinction than ever before. Ever before. Extinction is happening at such a rapid pace, and that is what is frightening. The appearance of COVID-19 has shown that when we destroy biodiversity, we destroy the system that supports human life. The more biodiverse the ecosystem is, the more difficult it is for a pathogen to spread rapidly or dominate. Loss of biodiversity provides an opportunity for pathogens to pass between animals and people. So, can you please explain what do you mean by biodiversity loss? I mean, I keep hearing people saying this, as especially scientists in the sector who keep saying we are losing biodiversity. But what does it mean to a person to understand what is biodiversity loss? How are we upsetting the balance of nature and our ecosystem, and how are we abusing our biodiversity? And that's something that really need to. Anish, you like to go first, please?
Yeah. So biodiversity loss is not a difficult term to understand because it actually literally means what it talks of. It means that whenever but we'll have to still kind of go slightly deeper because, as I said, there is something called species richness. The species richness is that in a particular area, how many different species exist, and there is how much is the population of species. So if you have a place and you have, say, 500 individuals of plants or animal, whatever you call it, but if they are, say, 50 different species and 15 individuals of 25 species and 5 individuals of 25 species, you understand? So there are 50 species which where the population is spread, and in another system there are 500 individuals, but if they belong to just 5 species and one species is 250 number and the remaining 4 species makes or constitute another 250, so the number is the same. However, the diversity is not. The species richness is not. And that is very important, because sometimes for a novice who enters the forest looks green, and they say, oh, there is nothing wrong in the forest. But when an ecologist, and especially people who understand plants, when they walk into the forest, just by looking at, so in a rainforest, and I'm giving you an example of a particular type of evergreen forest in Western Ghats. Okay. You could walk on a transect. When a transect, I mean, for a researcher, they will either it's a straight line or a curving line, whatever, but when they walk on it and they're looking at species on both sides, and they will fix that, they will look at species which are within 5 meters from where they are walking on both sides. In a 1 kilometer walk, in a healthy forest, you could have in excess of 300 to 350 species of plants that you will see there. Okay. Some of these areas are even richer than that. So I am talking about not a random location, but in some areas like Amazon, in some areas of Western Ghats, like if you go to a place like Annamalai, or you go to Parambikulam or something, you will see that the diversity is that high. So, but if you walk into a plantation, you will still see that greenery. But because there is only 1 or 2 type of species, while it gives you the shade, it looks green. If you go into the soil, you will see that the microflora is very different. The quality of soil is very different, because soil is nothing but a byproduct of dead plant and animal and the broken fragments from rocks and several other abiotic factors. So that together becomes like a very nutritious feed. Now that feed, once you reduce biodiversity and the plant species go down or the animal species go down, the soil character changes. And that, in natural, if you look at ecological time scales also, because of some events like ice ages, or if there was a meteorite that hit the planet, or there are volcanoes, the quality of soil changes. But most of these events take place slowly. Okay. Like a meteorite will hit immediately, but other things will change, and it will be so slow that it allows the animals and plants to slowly adapt with it. But what we have done is we have changed the nature of this atmosphere so rapidly within 200 years, and there are so many plants or so many trees whose life cycle is so vast, which means a banyan tree can live on this planet for 1,000 years. 1,000 years. When you change it so rapidly, and you look at the time spans and the life cycles of many plants and animals, it is impossible for a species to adapt. So you couldn't have lost your tail overnight just because you decided to walk on the ground. It will take you a million years to do that. So we as human beings, because of the urge of having more and consuming so much more, and because the population is huge and growing, we are putting so much pressure and changing things so rapidly that even nature is not able to keep up with it. So all those species, all those species whose life cycles are massive or large compared to the change that is happening, are not going to be able to adapt. So one, the biodiversity goes down because we remove the forest. B, it goes down because of poaching. C, by pollution. But third is the climate change aspect. And that becomes, once all of these are put into the bowl, it becomes such a deadly combination that you cannot reverse the negative impact. So biodiversity is not like a reversible thing. Once it goes, it almost never comes back to the original form.
Yeah, and that's the scary part, right? And that's where all these diseases are happening, and that's how we are abusing or changing or recreating, recalibrating the balance between nature and our ecosystem, right? Abhi, do you want to add to that? Abhi, you're muted.
Yeah, as Anish very well explained, how types of biodiversity loss occur. But let's just take a step back. There's an interesting statistic that 99% of all species that have ever occurred on Earth are already extinct. Okay? So what we see around us, bounteous as it is, is a very small fraction of all the species that ever occurred in the Earth. Okay, so extinction of species is a natural process.
Right.
Okay, but as Anish mentioned, what's happened now is that there have been times when the rate of extinction has changed from the background rate. Okay, so we've had 5 great extinctions, mass extinctions before this, and now we are in the 6th one. The main difference between this one and all the others that have occurred before it is that one single species is predominantly responsible.
Dominating.
Okay, so this is called the Anthropocene mass extinction.
Yes.
Okay, because it is driven by human action. In fact, this epoch itself, this era itself, is called now the Anthropocene because human actions are leaving behind a lasting record in the geological record. And when we look at long time, when we look at the Earth's history and geological time, all of this will also be a blip. It will disappear again. Things will come back. What we are trying to preserve, in terms when we are trying to say, when we're trying to be concerned about biodiversity loss, what we're actually trying to preserve is conditions that have made our own civilizations rise. The human civilization, we are trying to preserve ourselves. That's really what it is that we are trying to fight for. Okay, species will come and species will go. Okay, there will be in another 100,000 years. There may be, or in 1,000,000 years, there might be a completely new set of species that you'll see on Earth. But it is the atmosphere and the kind of environment that humans have now reached the pinnacle of their societal evolution. Okay? This is what we are trying to protect. This is what we are trying to preserve. Although ironically, the very thing that has brought us to this level of sophistication and allowed human biomass on Earth to now pretty much, humans and our domestic animals, their biomass on Earth pretty much exceeds almost all other animals. Okay, but that very process itself is endangering our own lifestyles.
Absolutely.
Okay, and it's because of various factors, but it started with the Industrial Revolution. Okay, so with countries industrializing rapidly, their per capita consumption rates rising rapidly, their per capita carbon emissions rising rapidly. Okay, that has now left the entire world at risk. So now when poorer countries, so when we talk about climate change, negotiations and so on and so forth, okay, it is, so, countries like India and China and all of the other ones which are catching up. Although China now, of course, is no longer catching up, it's caught pretty well up. India is catching up. We are trying to say, hey, we also want a piece of this carbon pie.
Yes.
Okay, we also want to grow. We have poor people. We want to bring them out of poverty. Okay, we want to increase lifestyle. The question is, do we do that at the cost of endangering the very environment that has allowed this kind of change to occur?
Absolutely.
And therefore, the onus then falls on the countries that were responsible for most of the damage in the first part of the century, first part of the last century. Okay, and they're still doing it. It's not like anybody has stopped. I mean, the US only just now re-entered the Paris Climate Agreement. We've lost 4 years. We've lost 4 years when at a time we should have been rapidly accelerating towards decarbonizing our economies. But we've lost 2 years. India is not doing too much either, despite what you hear. We are not doing too much for when it comes to reversing biodiversity loss. In fact, we are still forging ahead with disastrous projects, including this completely harebrained scheme to so-called develop the Great Nicobar Islands. I mean, seriously, the people sitting at Niti Aayog need to just look outside their window. They're sitting in one of the most polluted places on Earth, and they want to go ahead and destroy another ecosystem.
This is a this is a common dialogue and debate that's happening for a long time, where they're talking about this development versus nature. But there is no argument there. We want both, but we don't want it at the cost of each other, right? And that's the discussion, that is another one for another day. But let's just focus on today, on this particular issue about how we are abusing biodiversity, and how are we changing the whole balance, the harmony that we live in nature. Siddharth, do you want to add to that what Abhi and Anish explained?
No, I think they've touched the concept and all the issues really well. What I'm going to do is quickly give you examples of our work. So since I'm in Nainital in Uttarakhand right now, my organization TERI just prepared the State Biodiversity Action Plan for the entire state of Uttarakhand. This was in 2017. And what we found, and I would like to share this with you all, is that if we talk about, we've been talking about wild biodiversity, but if we talk about domestic biodiversity, there's a sheep and wool development board here, where the entire mandate is just to increase the wool production.
Okay.
But for doing that, they are 100% focusing on promoting exotic species, the merino sheep, which is an exotic species, even though the state breeding policy states that 50% indigenous animals have to be retained and they have to be promoted. But there are conflicting mandates within the department. And this is not just in Uttarakhand, this you see across the country. Yeah. So, or if you talk about the Chardham Road that is coming in the sensitive zone of Gangotri, these are all glacier areas. These are all very sensitive areas. But again, these infrastructure projects, hydroelectric plants that are coming on Bhagirathi Basin, which is again a very, very sensitive area. We know how many disasters have come in. If we just talk about the recent disaster that came in Uttarakhand, where the entire hydroelectric plant has been washed away. But as humans, we are just not learning from that. The local people here had a wonderful system called Baranaja, where 12 different varieties of plants are grown, and whatever grows, grows, So it's a very unique way of, conserving your biodiversity. But now these international big companies, Monsanto, Syngenta, they're all coming in and they're getting their own seed varieties which are artificially prepared in labs. And that is again hampering our local biodiversity, which is much more resistant to the local diseases.
And resilient to climate change.
Yes. And exactly. But because we are getting in these Jersey cows, because we are getting in these exotic species, even though the production is high, and one may feel that it is financially more suitable, but in the long run, it definitely is hampering with our biodiversity.
So clearly, short-sightedness of policies, of practices, that of human greed, and again human intervention, human actions, including deforestation, encroachment on wildlife habitats, intensified agriculture, acceleration of climate change, as Anish explained, have upset the delicate balance of nature. We have changed the system, clearly, that would naturally protect us and would have created conditions that would allow pathogens, including coronavirus, to spread. So I want to come back to this whole issue of, so the loss of biodiversity also means that we're losing, even before discovery, many of the nature's chemicals and genes, of the kind that are already provided humanity with tremendous health benefits. Nature has also provided us medicine, both traditional and modern, that continues to play an essential role in healthcare, especially in primary healthcare. So, how has this loss in biodiversity specifically affecting our health, and how is it linked to the current pandemic? And that's a key question that I really want to pose to each of you. Abhi, let's start with you.
So there are several there are several things to talk about on this topic. But one of the things when I was talking about what is biodiversity, I mentioned about interactions. It's important to understand the nature of interactions between individuals, between species, between ecosystems, and between populations of species. Also, let's not forget that what we call pathogens, bacteria, fungi, even viruses are living, not living,
Microorganisms, as they call it, right?
Most microorganisms are also an important component of biodiversity. They are also species. They're also they add to the species richness that Anish was talking about earlier. All of us, we are surrounded by viruses. We are surrounded by bacteria. We are surrounded by fungi. Okay, our mouths are full of bacteria. Our stomachs are full of bacteria. We have a microbiome. A lot of those are beneficial to us. They keep us healthy. They keep us happy. Okay, there's a huge amount of literature now on how our gut microflora, for instance, can determine your mood and your sickness and all sorts of things. Okay, when we look at intact ecosystems, ecosystems with a biodiverse ecosystem, or ecosystems that have a full complement of species, they also have a full complement of microorganisms or pathogens circulating within those species. Okay. Now, most of these species, these pathogens tend to not make these animals very sick because they're co-evolved. Okay. So there can be a whole host of viruses and bacteria and so on within each host species, but they don't necessarily make them very sick. Okay. But it's when you disturb the system, it's when you introduce an external stress, okay, that's when the animal itself, because the individual can become stressed, and it can then its immunity lowers and it can get sick. Okay. Or when you introduce conditions where species that have not interacted with each other before are put in close contact. For example, there are three patterns or global patterns that lead to what's called risk of emerging infections. That is human density, okay, how many people there are, our livestock density, what's our domestic animal population out there, and biodiversity. Okay. So when you put all of these three together and on a map, you'll see that countries like India, South China, Southeast Asia, they stand out because we are a biodiversity hotspot. We also have the highest human population on Earth. We also have amongst the highest livestock on Earth. And these are all interacting with each other very closely. Okay? Because humans in India have lived and interacted with areas of high biodiversity and continue to do so for millennia. Okay, it's what's happening now with forests rates of the loss of or the rates of land cover change or the rate of deforestation or the rate of loss of habitats. Now I won't just talk about just deforestation. I mean, Anish is going to talk about forests, but it's not just about forests. It's about loss of grasslands, deserts, wetlands, Himalayan glaciers.
Mountains, yes.
All of these cause stresses to ecosystems.
Oceans.
The loss of populations cause stresses to ecosystems. Okay, and when we then bring all these together, you have the likelihood of a pathogen that was circulating by itself in a wild host population jumping over to either a domestic animal, okay, which can act as an amplifying host because we tend to rear domestic animals also in close conditions. Think of any poultry farms, any industrial scale poultry farm that you see. Okay, think of bird flu. Or there might also be that the pathogen can transfer directly from the wild host to a human. Okay, right. For example, the Nipah virus outbreak that happened recently.
Yes.
Or it could be via vector. Okay, so I'll give you an example. There's something called Casanova forest disease that's found in southern Western Ghats. Earlier, it was seen only in Karnataka, but over the last 10, 20 years, it's shown up in Kerala, it's shown up in Maharashtra, it's shown up in Goa. Okay, why is this happening? Because the forest ecosystems are changing. You're having more plantations coming up there, which means you have more people coming in there, and the tick hosts that this it's a virus that's found in ticks, and when a tick takes a blood meal and then in its next life cycle it bites another person or it bites a person, it can transfer that virus to those people. So in plantations you might have more livestock, therefore you might have more ticks in those places, and so we created conditions
Yes.
that have increased the risk of these pathogens spilling over from wildlife to humans.
Humans.
Or to circulate in greater numbers and to mutate in our large domestic animal populations. And so that's how the risk of zoonotic pathogens, so that is diseases that can spill over from animals to humans, that's how it increases when we perturb biodiversity.
That's true. Yeah, that's very well explained. Thank you, Abhi. I'll come to Anish now. Anish, what is your take on how this is affecting biodiversity loss is affecting our health, and how is it related to the current pandemic?
So I think the technical explanation is already covered. What
Yes.
I would try and take another aspect of this entire issue.
Okay.
So we spoke about forest degradation, and we spoke about explosion of population.
Yes.
And so human population, of course, has exploded, and there are pockets of extremely dense human populations. And because of that, the population is not equally spread. It is all in some areas where human population is extremely low,
Yes.
but in some areas it is so high that when a pathogen jumps, a zoonotic disease hits, it has an opportunity to multiply or enter hosts very rapidly. So in nature, pathogens or any, for that matter, he spoke about viruses that are there on your body. And
Yes.
it's not this is not the first time when a zoonotic disease has hit us. Even when the human density was much lower,
Yeah.
there have been situations where the entire human population of certain areas on this planet were wiped off. Right? So there the forest was intact. Human density was low, right? Yet those diseases did impact us. What is now changed then? What has changed is that because we have such huge human populations, and there is an urge, or the responsibility squarely lies on the governments to sustain that human population, right? How do you sustain them? By providing them food, by providing them certain important resources, right? So for that, you need to also have livestock, because you will need fodder, milk. You will need things, though basic necessity in terms of vitamin, protein. And in India, we are lucky that we are largely vegetarian. But if you look at other countries where their human density is much lower, but the load per person, if you look at the weight of meat per person, not only by consumption but also what they are using, it is so much that their forests have not gone because of anything, but it's only gone so that they can create pastures so that the beef can be grown on it, right? So so on one hand, human population is degrading the forest because of our basic needs. So in India, there are so many issues, because see, if there is a large population, you need to connect that population if you want to provide employment, livelihood. So these are necessity and nobody argues on it. But how do you get them is by connecting them. How do you connect them? Through infrastructure. So now you are connecting the remotest part. So like a Casanova disease that he's talking about, in the past, it would only pass through human beings or animals in that vicinity. But now, if a highway is passing through it, if I have parked my car and I'm just, spending some half an hour there, and if a tick gets onto my body, I am capable of taking it 5,000, kilometers away actually. Because I could be boarding from my car, go to a station, board a train, go to a airport on the same day, take a flight and go to another country. So the planet area has remained the same. Accessibility has gone up. Humans have penetrated deep into the jungle. Human density has gone up, and those other species like the poultry. So in fact, I don't know the exact stats, but if you look at the actual number of mammals on Earth, the large majority of the mammals are livestock.
Yes.
Right. So if you look at the number of birds on this planet, the large majority of birds are poultry and all those things which are bred for our consumption. So that's why I had mentioned earlier that the number of living organisms on the planet, especially the large ones that you can see, may have gone up actually. But the biodiversity has gone down because for all these livestock, which are a handful of species, you could probably, there are 30, maybe 25 species that we have tamed and that we breed so that we can consume some body part or eggs or whatever it is, right?
At the cost of other species.
So that's what. So when you have to feed them, what happens? So if I want to grow soya, and that soya is used for many things, including making fuel, is used for consumption of human beings, it is used for feed for livestock. So where does this soya come from? So if I am living in Europe, and if I want to have my meat every day, where is the soya coming? Europe doesn't have place to grow so much soya. So they then give it to a third party, and that party could be Brazil, that party could be India, that could be something in Africa, which is far more biodiverse anyways, because they're tropical countries. And so what happens is a rainforest, which has been there for millions of years, is cut off for soya, which is also not directly consumed by people. It is converted into fodder. And from that fodder, you are making, then you are slaughtering a cow or a buffalo or whatever it is, and that you are consuming. So when conservationists and environmentalists talk about calculating the amount of water, and one must also calculate the amount of area and amount of forest footprint that particular product is using up. It is the most inefficient way of utilizing natural resource, because at every stage you are losing energy from the system, and therefore the fodder that is sold for peanuts is actually liquidating forest, which is invaluable, because that forest value is not just the standing tree cover, but it is the ecosystem services, which means the pollination, the germination, the temperature regulation, the soil formation, rainfall, oxygen. You cannot even imagine how many ecosystem services we get from there. Just for a stat, about 30% or I think more number of vegetables that you and I are eating are actually pollinated by bees and other wild organisms. So when you convert a biodiverse, the most biodiverse parts of the world to create a monoculture of soya, this is just a soya example, and in that soil you are putting fertilizers, you are putting pesticides so that the soya grows bigger, and it's all biologically modified. You are causing the kind of imbalance that we can't even talk. So a zoonotic disease is only a symptom of a symptom. The cause is something else. So we will fight this virus through vaccines, we'll fight this virus through social distancing, but that is again a symptomatic battle. Obviously we have to fight it because we are losing human life. But if we don't open our eyes and actually fight the cause, we are only going to be 10 steps behind biology, and we will always play catch, and with growing time there will be more social unrest because poverty will go up, inequity will go up, and that is going to destabilize the planet like crazy. So I'm not looking at this as just a disease, but this is going to create a refugee situation in tomorrow, because so many nations are going to fail because of this.
So actually, you hit the nail on the head, Anish, because it's not just the health, it's the economy, it's the development. Everything is interrelated to our biodiversity. And somehow or the other, it is connected. And we're not able to see these connections. And our greed and our short-term goals and objectives are actually totally destroying the harmony that we have. The nature tried to maintain, it's trying to maintain on its own. And we are interfering because we want immediate gains. And one good thing I wanted to share with you when you were talking, Anish, is that yesterday I was at a CII, EU and EBTC conference, and then what was very interesting is that both the investors and countries which are now funding are looking at the cost and the footprint that the biodiversity gets affected before making that investment. And so that's one good thing, that companies are also now talking about the biodiversity footprint and being conscious about how much is the nature doesn't give you an invoice of using all its resources, but we are making a dangerous exploitation of them. So how do we control that is something that even the corporates are looking at and investors are looking at. But are governments looking into it? Are we aware about that? That's something that we also need to little bit talk about. But coming to Siddharth, I wanted to come back to this whole issue. Do you have any your perspective on how this loss of biodiversity, very well explained by Abhi, and of course Anish has given a classic example of how not just health, but it is affecting a lot of other things. But coming back to health, health has been such an important issue. We have been dependent on biodiversity not just for our medicines, but for many other traditional and modern medicine also, and including the vaccination that we're getting today. And yet now nature has, because of this imbalance, has created this pandemic. What is your take on that?
So I absolutely agree with Abhi and Anish, and they have, elaborated the whole transfer of these zoonotic diseases and how it's impacting our health, and basically how it's all related to the loss of biodiversity. So
Right.
there are many examples. You talk about Ebola, you talk about the Nile virus, the Zika virus that Abhi mentioned, and now this COVID situation. It's all happening because of our greed, and somewhere humans do need to stop all the plundering that we are doing, and we do need to realize that all these things. I mean, the governments and all are aware of it, but somewhere not much action is being done on ground, is what I feel.
Okay. Thank you, Siddharth. I just wanted to kind of give you an estimate that today it is estimated globally about 1 billion cases of illness and millions of deaths occurred every year from diseases caused by coronaviruses. And about 75% of all emerging infectious diseases in humans are zoonotic, as explained by Abhi earlier, what it means. And meaning that they are transmitted from people to people by animals. So clearly, as Anish explained, it's a symptom. Nature is sending us a message, loud and clear, that we are interfering in businesses that we were not supposed to be. This year, the motto of the International Day of Biological Diversity is "Our solutions are in nature," to emphasize hope and solidarity and the importance of working together at all levels to build a future of life in harmony with nature. The current trend of the COVID-19 epidemic has highlighted the extreme importance of combating the loss of biodiversity. If we humans have created the havoc of our nature, how can we collectively now try to restore or at least conserve what is remaining? How are we part of the solution? That's the biggest question that I have to you. And then I want to spend the rest of the time that we have talking about examples and ways that we can be part of the solution to prevent and at least reduce the probability of such pandemics in future. What has worked in your experiences, and all of you come with very rich experiences, and what can each one of us do to be part of this solution to restore or conserve our biodiversity? Siddharth, why don't you start by taking us through your experiences in working with the tribal communities in Nagaland and encouraging them to ban logging and give up hunting and restore as well as conserve forests? Siddharth.
Yeah, thank you, Vasanthi. So there's always lots to learn from the community. So I have a small
Yes.
presentation that I would like to share here. Basically, it just highlights the great work that the communities are doing. Sometimes we feel that it's much easier to work with the communities because they understand much more rather than working with the governments and the elite, so-called. Because it's already been a part of our tradition, and they have been. Okay. So I hope the slides are visible.
Yes. Yes. Now
Yeah.
we will
So I'll quickly take you through our experience.
Put it in presentation mode, please.
It is in presentation mode.
Okay.
Is it fine?
Sabi, is it okay?
No, Siddharth, it's not on presentation mode. You may have to do it once more.
Is it fine now?
No.
Wait, there's a time lag. So, no, it's not. So, what you do is first go on presentation mode and then shift from live view to presentation.
I see.
Yeah. Because people may be viewing us on phones. It may be damn difficult for them.
Difficult to see it.
I understand. Now is it fine?
In the meanwhile, when you do the presentation, I just wanted to say there are people in the audiences who are giving us comments, and please feel free to give me your questions if there are any. I will take it up towards the end. Thank you. Go ahead, Siddharth, whenever you're ready.
So basically, what I wanted to stress on is that if you talk about India, then almost two-thirds of our forests are outside the protected areas. In fact, the protected area, if you talk about national parks, if you talk about sanctuaries, they only constitute about 4% of our area, which is very minuscule. But a lot of forest is actually lying outside these protected areas. So I wanted to just present a case study on a phenomenal work that is ongoing in the state of Nagaland. You may be knowing that.
Sorry to interject. Can you expand if it's not going on the slideshow mode, at least pull down the because there is the note part you can open up, and also the side what you see the slide on the left, and that also you can close. That way it will increase the size of the thing. Yeah.
Is this
much
better?
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Basically, it falls in one of the biodiversity hotspots in our country, which is the Indo-Burma hotspot. The northeast is very crucial for us because it almost covers 25% of our forest cover, and it is a very, very biodiversity rich area. Most of the species that are being discovered are from this particular part of our country. The forest resource management is very unique here because unlike other parts of India, almost 100% of the forests are owned and managed by the local communities there. So the individuals, clan and village councils, they are actually look after their own forests, and they are the ones who take decisions on how they're going to manage their forests. So right now, you'll be surprised to know that almost 80% of the geographical area of Nagaland is forested, and 36% comes under forest cover, dense forest cover. So Nagaland is quite unique because, as I said, the villages are governing their own resources, and they are also maintaining their law and order, and they are responsible for whole other duties. So this is about the unique food culture that we have in Nagaland. Almost everything that you get there is organic. You can see some pictures here, bamboo shoots, some organic things that are grown there. But traditionally, these communities have also been hunting. So you'll see lots of pictures here of birds, animals that are being sold. There are a lot of wildlife markets also. Even though the numbers have gone down, but still you can see a lot of wildlife that is being sold for consumption purpose, especially in areas like Nagaland, Arunachal, and so on. The community aspect is really interesting here. Here you can see a moving picture of community fishing, where the entire village just goes to a river, and in a very synchronized way they're beating. There's a root which gives out some sort of poison and just stuns everything in the river. Here you can see one example of community farming, where the entire village just help each other during farming. And there is one more example of community hunting, where the entire village just sets out and kills whatever they can in their forest. So, hunting and destructive fishing is a major issue in Nagaland. And
Sir, it's stuck on the first. It's just showing introduction of the Nagaland. It's not going anywhere.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
I'm so sorry. Has it moved now?
Yes, it's moved now.
Okay. So what is the answer to this excessive hunting or destructive fishing that goes on? So it's basically since time immemorial, each and every village in Nagaland, they have been conserving some patch of forest, and we call it a community conserve area. And Terry did this extensive survey in 2015, where we found that out of total of 400 villages, around 407 villages had very active CCAs or very active forests, where they had completely banned hunting logging, and they were conserving those patches of forest. So that we found to be very unique. But there were certain challenges that these community conserved areas were also facing. One being that the average size was very small, close less on an average about 500 hectares. In the picture here, you can see that on the right hand side there are very lush green CCA area that you can see, but on the left hand side the forest has been cleared due to shifting cultivation. So this was a big problem that the CCAs or the forests were not continuous. So for free flowing movement of wildlife or for for the biodiversity to proliferate, this was a big hindrance. So Terry has been working with these communities since year 2016, and we are just trying to rejuvenate these traditional practices. We are trying to convince them to extend the hunting bans. We are trying to do extensive biodiversity documentation in these far-flung areas where nobody has worked before. And we are also trying to see some alternate livelihoods, because right now there are no big industries there. So the entire focus is on logging and also agriculture. So just a small example, we've been working with these three villages in Zuneboto district of Nagaland, Skai, Gukui and Kiviko. And we've been trying to do a lot of community mobilization that has resulted in forming a CCA network between these three communities, where now the communities have come together and they're jointly conserving these much larger tracts of forest, and they've been very active in that. So a lot of work has gone into that. We've done participatory mapping. We've trained the local youth there on how to use GPS so that they can map their boundaries. Then we have linked these different CCAs belonging to these three villages across the landscape. As I said, every village has the sanctioned resolution. So these are like rules and laws. So there is a fine of 25,000 rupees, and that's a huge sum of money if anyone is caught hunting or fishing in these areas. This is not just on paper, but a lot of fines have also been imposed on trespassers. Mostly the villagers from these three villages abide by the laws, but usually these trespassers are from the neighboring villages who come and try and hunt in these areas. So right now we have a much larger area of about 939 hectares, but the villagers have decided to basically ban hunting and destructive fishing across the entire area, which is close to 3,751 hectares. So this is a very large area where they have willingly decided that they are not going to hunt and they are going to also protect the biodiversity. There has also been a lot of conservation education awareness, of course, because these people were never exposed. They were protecting the biodiversity, but they never knew that the technicalities of it. So we've been helping them to do that. A lot of exposure visits we've conducted in the nearby northeastern states. This is a very important part about biodiversity assessments, because as I said, there is a very, very unique biodiversity, not just in terms of wild fauna, but flora, medicinal plants, a lot of these things. So in Nagaland, what you will find is that most of this traditional knowledge, it's all oral. It has never been codified. So this is for the first time that we've prepared biodiversity registers, and we have documented all this local biodiversity with local names as well as scientific names, pictures, and this entire exercise has been done by the local communities themselves. Here you can see some pictures. Now the communities are so motivated that they have bought their own camera traps. They are trying to document what all biodiversity exists. We have documented close to 222 species of birds, 31 reptiles, 200 species of butterflies. This is just over a span of 4 years. And let me tell you that most of these things were not visible, but only after complete protection that you are now seeing these species slowly returning to this area. This year, we also documented a lot of Amur falcons roosting in this area. So definitely they are finding this as a safe haven. And we've also involved the local communities. They have been a lot of new records. We, of course, the local communities have been co-authors in the scientific publications that have been published. We've also tried to promote some ecotourism there. We've so far had 5 biodiversity meets in this area, and where interested people from all parts of the country, they've come to see and document local birds and butterflies. And this has really helped to increase the checklist. Here you can see some beautiful photographs. They've all been taken by the local communities themselves. So actually the hunters who were hunting these species at one point have now turned into protectors, and now they're actually documenting the local biodiversity as well as also earning through some sort of ecotourism. These are some of the rare records. All these wonderful posters have been developed by the communities themselves. You can see them on the screen. So this was just some bit about the wonderful effort that the communities are doing. The reason to tell you this is because actually the future is with the communities. If you try and motivate them, then there's lots that the communities can do for preserving the biodiversity as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Siddharth. That was really very interesting, and to see the biodiversity registrars being maintained and documentation being prepared by the community. It's actually a very participatory methodology of not just living in harmony, but also making sure that you are acknowledging and registering the biodiversity around you, and that's a fantastic way. But that's one community, and I know for sure, and the reason why we have survived so long is that we've had such fantastic examples and case studies, and some of the work done by you sitting right here, like the examples Siddharth has given, and I know Abhi has done a lot of work, and so has Anish with this so many projects that they have done. And I want to know a little bit more about it, because many people sitting in cities, especially in the metros, do not know of these practices that are going on and the efforts that are going on at different levels, not necessarily civil society, not necessarily NGOs, not necessarily community, not necessarily individuals. There are some actually very good government and state government policies and central government policies that are working, but we don't talk about it. What we talk about is what is not working. For example, somebody in the comments said about Ananya project of feeding the poor in Nellore district, using the local, conserving the local biodiversity local crops. So these are interesting projects that have been going, and we need to know a little bit more so that we all get inspired and do more. And we need to obviously scale them up, because we clearly the sound that it's making, that we're not doing enough. Abhi, let me take it over to you to give me a little bit more examples on how can we be part of the solution to reduce such pandemics in futures, at least.
So there's a lot of call for individual action when it comes to either climate change or reducing plastic waste, for instance. But one of the things, and we found now, and equally so, is that we tend to forget that there's only a handful of individuals who are creating, or who are behind most of this problem, and those individuals run large corporations across the world. I call this a symptom. It's called billionaireism. We're really enamored of it. We celebrate billionaires. We look at Gautam Adani became the second richest person in Asia. I mean, it's a shame.
It is a shame.
It's an absolute travesty that in a country that still has millions of, this year alone, something like 30 million people plus fell back into poverty.
Absolutely.
Okay, and we are celebrating the fact that one person became, amassed $67 billion worth. So this is the problem, this hyperconsumption. And Anish mentioned it. He says, there's increasing inequity in the world. The gap between the rich and the poor is increasing, and this has been happening for the last 20, 30 years. So, there's an interesting article in our constitution, in the Constitution of India, which people seem to not realize or think about more. This is Article 31. Okay, and there's a part in there that says that the operation of the economic system. So basically, the state shall direct its policy towards securing, and it says under C, it says that the operation of the economic system does not result in the concentration of wealth and means of production to the common detriment. The writers of a constitution really were very far-sighted, and unfortunately, our governments have lost sight of that currently. So a lot of what you see now, what you see now is a symptom of that. Okay, that governments have lost sight of what a core principle of the constitution itself, and we are seeing example after example where Siddharth gave such a wonderful example of the communities being in charge of areas, but then you have governments coming in and taking land away from communities and handing it over to corporates. Okay, so it's suddenly as if the common good no longer matters. So when we ask ourselves, what is this individual action that we can take? That individual action is to not be politically inert when it comes to being part of the environmental clause. Okay, I see that. I think Rajkamal just asked me this question: can we be political? No, we cannot. Okay, we bring politics into every single thing of our lives. Now our very lives depend on it. Okay, we don't have a green party in India. Nobody in their manifesto talks about the environmental cause.
Yes.
Okay, and by the way, I'm not being critical only of the current NDA government. I was just as critical of the UPA government and the governments before that. The last few years of the UPA government were disastrous in terms of the loosening of the environmental framework that we had in India. That has been accelerated massively in the last 6-7 years. Okay, we are actually going way backwards when it comes to strengthening biodiversity law, environmental laws. No, we're actually loosening them one after the other. Okay, our Ministry of Environment, our National Board of Wildlife hasn't met a single time in the last 7 years. Okay, it has just become a clearance board. It always was, but now it's become even more so. So when we think of, this is at the broader level. Okay, it has to be this way because individual action has to, yes, we can ban straw, we can use less straws, we can use less. Let's not use disposable plastic cups. Let's whatever, consume less meat. All of those things are fine at individual levels.
And they're
switch to LED bulbs. They're important. They're important, but the magnitude of action that's required, it has to come from governments. Okay, because they are drivers of change. They can drive policy, and people can drive governments to do so by choosing wisely, and making holding political parties to account. We have to hold them accountable. And this is what part of being a democracy means. This is a broad level thing, and I wish I had more specific answers. I do, but I think they are lost when it comes to these kinds of what can we do for biodiversity loss. It's a global problem.
I know, Abhi, that you and ATREE, there's a lot of work that is happening at an individual, at a species, at an ecosystem level, that you are making efforts to kind of conserve and restore that particular ecosystem. That I know that you are doing that as a conservationist and a biologist. Your work efforts continue to do so. But and I know you're speaking right now from a political angle about how we can do this at scale, right? That's exactly what you're answering, right?
Yes. Exactly.
Okay. So thanks, Abhi, for sharing that. And I completely endorse what you're saying is that we have to be choosing our governments much more caring about what their stand is on biodiversity and environmental issues, for example. And also not just after being elected, being accountable for holding those policies and following those policies. And if there are any projects and programs that are not favorable to our environment and the balance of our harmony with nature, then we need to protest. We need to say that, have the courage to come up and say, no, this is harmful, and my next generation will be harmed with this. So I want to protest against this, and that is not happening enough. I see that also people are now feeling frightened about taking a stand, even with nature that we know is directly impinging on us and causing this havoc that we see today. Anish, over to you about explaining what can we do. How can not just governments? I know every stakeholder has a role to play. It's not just individuals. It's not just governments. It's not just civil society. It's not just community. It's international organizations. It's everybody has to play a critical role. So what? How are we part of the solution?
So, as others have said, I think the Nagaland experience is a case study, an important case study of how you don't need technology. What you need is the heart, and you need passion and love for your land.
Yes.
So it's migrations. I have no problem with people traveling across the planet. I feel each one of us is a global citizen. But when you are living on your land, that attachment and that love translates into action. When you displace people and when you send people out either to a city because the rural areas become almost impossible to survive in, you are creating detached human beings, and these detached human beings have hardly any space to make their ends meet. To expect them to do something for biodiversity and for this planet is just asking too much. Which means, so what I'm trying to get at is there are many things we can do. So actually, we can have a session on what can individuals, what can the governments do, what can the communities do, corporates do, and it will take us 48 hours.
Yes.
So everything that we are doing mostly is not the right way of doing things, first of all. But I will therefore spend some time talking about value systems.
Okay.
And so first is, you can't be a mute spectator anymore. You can't always try to be comfortable when you are getting into an issue. You can't fight issues on a weekend. You can't say that because my child has to go to an IB school, I have to work hard in the week and I will stop breathing in the week. I will only breathe in the weekend, and that's why then I will fight for environment. No. So you have to constantly do your bit in the choice you are making. So choice is the biggest thing on that we have to, everything around us. Whether I will switch on the light or off whatever I do, that's a choice. Right? So at every minute, at every second, we are making those choices. So for instance, Nagaland looks like a beautiful example, but the choice I make in Bombay or somebody makes in Guwahati will destroy the harmony that you see in Nagaland.
True.
So when a community creates this kind of an oasis, it's fantastic. But if I want a bathing tub in my house, and if that becomes a symbol for progress and growth, right? If that is advertised on television, advertisements is the biggest cause for creating distractions and false aspirations in people. So you chase after a SUV because as a child you are seeing that every day. Correct. So what, again, coming back to Nagaland, is that is when he says that currently it's about 939, if I'm not wrong. So it's about 9 square kilometers only. It will go up to 35 square kilometers. That is what they are wanting. What is 35 square kilometers? A small little national park in Sanjay Gandhi in Bombay is 103 square kilometers, and it is holding water, which is supplying water to 10% of Bombay. Right. So these small places can easily be drowned because people consume more water because the choice they are making is wrong. They will put pressure and a big dam will come, and because the dam cannot come in Delhi or Bombay or Bangalore city, it will go into a rural area where the communities will have no voice. They will just be picked up in a truck and they will be pushed, or some of those people will be bribed so that they feel that they will benefit from that water. But actually, again and again, if you look at developmental projects that have happened in India over the last 50, 60 years, I'm talking about post-independence only.
Absolutely.
It has never benefited the local community. So if you are in Delhi and you have a big thermal power plant close to Delhi, right? If you go there, the village next to that thermal power plant had no electricity at least 4 years back. Okay? And when I say no electricity, meaning, and when India is being talked about as electrifying rapidly, we actually, people should know that it means that people are getting electricity for 1 hour or 2 hours in a random manner. That is when when the cities are sleeping is when they'll get their electricity. So I am talking about these choices because we cannot talk about the straws, the plastics, because that is a given. It anyways you have to do that. But now we have reached a level, because as I said, our population is so much that just by saying I will not use plastic, I'm not going to solve, because we have already, there is a legacy of problem. And Abhi mentioned, I think, that the West 200 years ago started destroying the forests. And in fact, the invasion in countries like India were also as an offshoot of lack of resources in their own native countries, right? So it is not a recent problem. So the choice, and a Nagaland to a person living in Bombay, we have to understand that this is all connected. And being a mute spectator is because we want, because see, we are talking as a community, but human beings are not solitary, but they are also not gregarious, or they are not group loving. They like to be on one of these based on the convenience. So when I want to celebrate, I'll go, but when I want to make money and I want to have, I will compete with someone. So you are competing constantly on for resources, and then so you are swaying from group loving, where you're talking about the larger common good, and then you are suddenly talking about your inner self is talking about I want to do better than the next. So we have to, as grown-ups, I'm talking to the young people actually, because we have, we have already spent most of our lives on this planet. We are probably on our way out. I'm talking about the young people because they have not even been given the right choices. So if I was given a choice which was equal, and then I decide that I want to do this, I understand. But if they are constantly going to be bombarded, and their role models are going to be Salman Khans of this world, or they are going to be people who have made more wealth. And yesterday was it's a sad day for people who are doing conservation. We lost one of the stalwarts. Sundarlal Bahugunaji passed away, and I can bet on it that today, to the best IB school in India, not even 10% or 15% people know that those are our heroes. So we have to, so therefore, I feel that if we have to tackle this issue, it is not going to be symptomatic. It will have to be at a larger scale, which means what you show on television, what you are putting out on the boards, also making all the corporates answerable. Say, if your product is hitting the market, what is the entire supply chain like? Are you making sure that the communities that have been part of this, so if you are buying soya, for instance, because I was talking about soya, do you think that there they don't use child labor? There do they use? So when you actually do the sustainability assessment, it's not just the impact on the environment from the pollution point of view, but it has to it should cut across sectors. It is time now that we start looking at it as one, and therefore I feel that that one health, which is a very, very important word that is being coined today, should not remain a paper term like sustainability, because sustainability, actually, if you ask me, I'm irritated when I hear about sustainability, because behind the curtain of sustainability, we are actually chiseling away our resources, because our sustainability models are only valid for the next 5 years, which is the political term of a party. We don't ever consider that sustainability should be measured across ecological timescale. What is sustainable today is not sustainable when my grand niece is going to be living on this planet. So we need to change, and for that we need to change the definition of GDP. See, all these are connected. When GDP is only going to talk about money exchange and not talk about the liquidity, that means liquefying the natural capital, that GDP is actually grossly, it's a falsified term, and you are focusing everything on GDP, and therefore you are completely disregarding the importance of natural resources, and that is the cause for the market failure that we have. So this COVID issue and all that, I can work as an NGO and we are working on the ground, but I, as the head of that NGO, know that we are not even scratching the surface. So I am not fooling myself. So I am therefore sharing. And while it's important that we understand what to do, but it's also important to change what we receive from the system. So therefore, being mute spectators is not the way to do, right? So that's what I want to say. It's damn difficult to talk because I don't know the audience, and you can talk about anything. And I mean, we can all give away 10 things for people. It's not going to change. We have to. This about 50 years ago, maybe it would have helped, but now we are on a snowball. All those, it's not going to work.
The state of imbalance, the state of horrendous havoc that we have created in our in our biodiversity, clearly you can see from the frustration and the anxiousness of what Abhi and Anish have explained. I can completely get you when you say that it's all interlinked, and I really like the way that you have explained how our values and our a choice to act, a choice given to us, influences all our decisions and all the efforts that have been made. And but I don't want to be that pessimist, and I want to kind of believe that all the effort that we are working on will make at least scratch the surface, as you rightly pointed out. We have to at least do that. If we don't do that, even that is not going to happen, right? So we certainly there is not sufficiently, what we're doing is not sufficient. There's no doubt about it, and I completely agree with you that it has to be the political will, it has to be community efforts, like Siddharth explained. But there are certain policies, and One Health is what one you explained, and I wanted to actually bring in Abhi here for a minute, because we discussed earlier about how this concept seems to be interesting, and perhaps, as you rightly pointed out, it may not be sustainable, but how do we operationalize it? Abhi, do you want to talk a little bit about it?
Sure, thanks. And thanks, Anish, for bringing up One Health. What is One Health? It's a concept that was pioneered about almost 20 years ago now. Basically, it says that human health is intricately connected with animal health and environmental health. It's as simple as that, and it's something in India we know as part of our teachings as well. When you look at Ayurveda and other systems of traditional Indian medicine, those are self-evident. There's no. If you listen to any of our, read any of the Ayurvedic texts and so on, it's all connected. It talks about connections all the time. So the idea that environmental health, animal health, human health are all connected is of course self-evident. But what does it mean? I mean, this is like, as you know, it's One Health as a concept is nebulous there. It's like Anish is saying, it's like sustainability. It's such a vague concept. What does it mean? Okay, but its importance, or the importance of the framework becomes apparent when you start thinking of how it can be implemented on the ground. Okay, exactly. What does it mean? And I'll give you a couple of examples. So there's a disease in India, and it's called rabies. Of course, this is not just in India. Rabies is one of the oldest known zoonoses that humans. It's written. In fact, one of the oldest known written descriptions of it come from the Sushruta Samhita, written in Sanskrit. So we do know a lot about this disease, but the fact remains that we still haven't been able to control it. It's a virus. It's a very interesting virus. It's a unique virus. It's not like many of the other viruses that especially not like COVID-19, thankfully. It's spread mainly by the bite of an animal, okay, of a rabid animal. In countries like India, domestic dogs, free-ranging domestic dogs, are the main host for rabies. So the bite of a domestic dog will spread rabies. Now, rabies has no cure. Okay, if you get infected with rabies, you will die from it. Okay, but it's vaccine preventable. All right. So if you get a vaccine in time, you can. It's a very safe vaccine. It's been used for a long period of time, and it's 100% vaccine preventable. Okay. Now, what is One Health? So this is where we can see there's a direct link between human health and animal health. Okay. If you eliminate the disease in domestic dogs, then the chances of humans getting this disease also falls away. And this is the principle behind the WHO recommending that mass vaccination should be the way of eliminating rabies in India. Okay. Now this is easier said than done, though, and this is where the rubber meets the road. India has a population of about 60 million free-ranging dogs. Okay, it's virtually impossible to vaccinate 70% of them annually. All right. So this is where you need to understand the ecology of dogs, and this is some of the work we have been doing to try better understand. So things like animal birth control, for instance, don't work. It's not biologically meaningful. It makes no sense. Okay. So you need to think of some other way of making it work. How do you do it? Improve the relationship between humans and dogs. Okay. Let's not treat them as worthless objects on the streets. Okay. They are companion animals. Let's improve. Let's make sure that our laws that govern pet ownership, okay, licensing, registration, those are improved. All right. So that we don't have free-ranging dogs, unowned free-ranging dogs on the street that are not vaccinated. Right? Eventually, you want to have everybody say, yes, this is my dog. Look, here's a vaccination certificate for it. I take responsibility for it because it's my best friend and I am its. All right? That's how you take responsibility for it. And this is where you need to connect these two disparate fields of animal health and human health. Now, why are we talking about this when we're talking about biodiversity and zoonosis and public health? So let's broaden this field a little bit, right? In India, unfortunately, what we've done is we've created silos. Okay, we've got this. If you look at all our fields of education, they're very narrow, they're very vertical. Okay, you will study zoology, or you'll study commerce, or you will study botany, or whatever, economics. We don't have multidisciplinary learning. So what happens is we fail to see connections. Remember, I keep coming back to interactions and connections, right? Because this is what ecology is. The field of ecology is the study of interactions between different organisms.
Absolutely.
Okay, and pathogens connect us. All right. So something that affects an animal is also going to affect humans. Okay, and the environment affects both animals and humans. Now, if you're looking at our veterinary field, they are studying only animal health. If you're looking at our public health field, they're studying only public health. One Health says, let's create a team of people to work together so that they talk to each other. Okay, so that if there's an outbreak of some disease in animals, the people who are studying human health are also involved in that investigation. Okay, so that they can be alerted in time. Okay, or if the human health scientists are seeing a new disease coming up, they immediately talk to the ecologists and they talk to the animal health people and say, where is the source of this? Okay, but this does not happen. Why? Because we suffer from what's called the nodal institute model.
Yes.
Okay, so we have a National Institute of Virology, we have a National Institute of Epidemiology, we have a Wildlife Institute of India. Okay, all of these sit in their own institute campuses and they don't talk to each other necessarily. Okay, so this is what the One Health field tries to break apart. It wants to bring people together so that they talk to each other. Okay, and the government understands this. This is not a new concept, like I said. The government understands it. It has set up these intersectoral committees for bringing together these people. But the problem is our structures are so rigid that you can create committees all you want, but unless you put money behind actually monitoring all of these things, they don't get operationalized. And it can get operationalized at the central ministry, but it won't reach the state. Remember, state health is a state subject. Okay, and it won't reach the state, it won't reach the district, which is where the public health professional, the ASHA worker, the PHC, these are the people who are really in charge on the ground. When we're
We
talking
see
about
this
tackling
pandemic,
this
they are the ones
COVID pandemic, we are talking
yeah,
about these people. They are
absolutely.
the frontline workers. So we need to bring people. We need to bring the LDOs and LSSOs and the animal husbandry department people working together with the PHCs, and the role of ecologists. Now, listen, I want to stress here that ecology is the field that binds all of this together,
True.
because ecologists understand interactions. Okay. Most other fields, especially medical fields, are very mechanistic. They look at symptoms, they try and connect. They're very, they're deep down. Ecologists generally tend to look at big picture. They tend to
Yeah.
look at things in a broader sense, and things that people who are very specialized may not be able to look at. So you
Yeah.
can, a virologist looks at how is the virus evolving, what kind of a virus is it, how to, what kind of vaccine will but a broader understanding is required when you want to think about, how do you try and mitigate it? What are the risks that cause the emergence of this? Is there
Yeah.
something that we can do to stop it before it emerges?
Yeah.
What are the possible viruses out there that can emerge to humans? Which are the kinds of species that are most risky for the, is it bats, is it primates, is it rodents? How can we protect them so that these risks don't amplify? All of these questions start coming in, and that's why we need to all work together. Okay, team science is required to be
Yeah.
able to answer some of these really challenging questions, just as it is with climate change,
It is.
just as it is with all these other big even biodiversity loss.
Yeah, thank you, Abhi, so much for explaining the One Health, and it seems such an important thing of bringing together everybody. It seems so logical and commonsensical at one level, but it isn't. We know how the structures are created, and we have to really break them to come together now. Time's up, and we need to wind up. And I just you were all speaking so much of what was making sense, that I didn't want to kind of interrupt and say that this is it. But I do want to kind of end on a very a positive note, that yes, these challenges look huge. They look so complicated and complex that it makes you feel really powerless, and at some extent we are. In fact, the nature and the planet and the ecosystem, we are only a speck in the whole ecosystem, I guess. But we are causing all the damage. Our greed is at least certainly done where brought us where we are. So I do want to leave at a more positive note. I know what you all doing, as Anish is saying, just scratching the surface. My plea is that if we don't even scratch the surface, imagine where we would have been right now. Perhaps wouldn't have existed also. So that's something that I want to leave all the audiences and all the students and the young people who are watching to know, that we are not powerless. We have created the havoc. So the power is in us to make sure that we can. When I say us, it's not just me and you. It's the government, it's the community, it's the corporates, it's the stakeholders, it's the civil society, it's the NGOs, it's me as a person, me as a human being, me as a woman, you as a human being, me as an organization head, me as a mother, me as a wife, as an individual, right? And I do want to leave that positive note, that, and I have a role. I have certainly a voice and an agency in raising my concerns to conserve biodiversity for next generations through all these roles that I play through. And I'm sure all of us are already doing it, but in our own way, and we don't talk about it. And perhaps certainly it's not enough, is what this pandemic has shown us. COVID-19 has provided us an opportunity, I feel, to both revisit our relationship with nature and rebuild a more environmentally responsible world. Clearly, we must learn and adapt faster than ever. And the COVID-19 virus has lessons that apply to global crisis of biodiversity loss. For this reason, our best vaccine for the future is to protect nature and biodiversity. And I hope not just you and me are listening, but everybody is listening to this one. It is the best vaccine to protect our futures. It is no longer just a matter of ecology, as Abhi rightly pointed out, but for being aware that if we want to reduce the occurrence of pandemics, we must have healthy nature. So thank you all for all your experts today for clarifying and highlighting this today. I hope this webinar has clarified to the audience the importance of conserving biodiversity and the steps, even the little ones that we're doing by each one of us in our daily life and also our work can help conserve or restore our biodiversity and help prevent such disastrous epidemics to occur in future. Thank you once again to Abhi, Siddharth and Anish for participating in this discussion. And thank you all people who have sent us a lot of comments have come up, and I'm hoping that we have answered in our own way in our discussions. But we will continue this dialogue, and we will try to do all our efforts possible in our own way that we can, including the political one, including the community one, including individual one, including the organizational one, to continue doing our bit. Thank you once again, and namaskar. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Avi. Thank you, Siddharth.
Bye.